Okay, everyone, we are now live. So once again, we are live. This meeting is being live streamed on YouTube. Um, so my name is Nipa. I'm from Housing Court Answers, and today I'm here with the Legal Aid Society, who are doing a presentation on eligibility for cash public assistance. Um, sorry.
That's right.
And sorry, I was hearing myself on the live stream. Sorry about that. Yeah, so we're doing eligibility for cash public assistance. So your questions about HRA, cash assistance will be answered today. Your confusions will be cleared up. And from the Legal Aid Society today, we have Susan Bond, Michelle Tarangelo, and Vlada Viktorinenko, who are here to present, and I will turn it over to them. Thank you so much for doing this.
So my name's Susan Bond. I'm a member, we're all members of the Legal Aid Society's FHEPS team. And so we train on FHEPS and city FHEPS and the other things you need to know to process a FHEPS case if you work at a organization that is approved to process FHEPS cases for free. And so there are three main ways to get back rent through the New York City Department of Human Resources Administration. And one main way is with FHEPS, the Family Homelessness Eviction Prevention Supplement Program. One is through the City FHEPS program, and one is through rent arrears. So we're doing a short series about cash assistance today, eligibility, because you need to be eligible for cash assistance to obtain FHEPS. And next week we'll talk about rent arrears for people who are recipients of cash assistance and for others who are seeking a one-time grant of assistance who have other income. And then we'll talk about FHEPS on the 19th of March, and we'll talk about city FHEPS on the 26th of March. City FHEPS to stay in the community for people who are facing eviction in housing court. So let's go to the next slide, Michelle. And we wanted you to know if you have a tenant who needs help and doesn't have a housing attorney, the most important thing these days is to advise the tenant the first time they go to court to please ask the court to refer them to a tenant attorney. And sometimes, rarely, on a second or third appearance in court, they could ask the judge again for a housing attorney. Very few places have intake open in their offices because most of the people are getting housing lawyers appointed on their first court date. So not everybody is going to have a housing attorney. So if they need advice about a housing case, Legal Aid has a housing justice helpline where advice is given every day, and that phone number is there, 212-440-4230. And if people are having problems when they don't have a housing court case with their FHEPS or city FHEPS, Legal Aid has a helpline, and that's open from 10 to 3 every day, business day, at 888-663 6880. So that's the best way to refer your clients to get help at legal aid. And all the other legal services providers also, most of them have helplines, but it's very hard to get a housing court attorney right now. And eventually we'll all keep adding staff so that eventually almost everybody who's has income below 200% of the federal poverty line will be able to get a free attorney in housing court. Next.
Okay.
And I'll let you go, Michelle.
Okay, so our objectives today are to help clarify the basic rules of eligibility to qualify for cash public assistance. And in doing so, we hope that we'll be able to help illuminate what questions should be asked on intake and flag certain scenarios for issue spotting that can help you point out if somebody's going to be eligible for FHEPS, if they have an issue with their cash assistance case that needs to be addressed, and calculating a basic cash assistance budget to know potential shares when it comes to FHEPS eligibility. FHEPS and cash assistance, they are integral with each other. Cash assistance is the baseline, and FHEPS is an additional cash rent supplement that is added upon a family with minor children shelter allowance. So we explained that a little bit in this slide. Why do we need to learn about cash assistance? Because it is one of the most helpful ways to help resolve our clients' housing issues. If you encounter a family, they have an active cash assistance case, or a household in its family, you want to first see if there's a minor child in the home, right? Then if there was a minor child in the home, you want to see, is this household FHEPS eligible? You want to be able to check the housing court report, the printouts, and see what the family is receiving. If they are not eligible for cash assistance or FHEPS, you want to assess what other options are available to resolve the case. Whether that's with charities, one-shot deals, or city FHEPS, which Susan said will all be talked about in future trainings. But like I said, cash assistance and public benefits is one of the most important things to resolving our clients' cases, right? In non-pays, it's a way we can solve the arrears, and in holdovers, if they're eligible, we can help direct them to home-based providers to get shopping letters so they can move into affordable housing. So what is FHEPS? FHEPS is the Family Homelessness Eviction Prevention Supplement. FHEPS was born out of the Court of Appeals case Jiggets, which was brought by the Legal Aid Society on behalf of recipients of social services who were being denied rent payments and arrears payments due to their rent being in excess of their shelter allowances at that time. The shelter allowances were set, I believe, in 1988 for families with children. And they're inadequate now, the shelter allowance amounts, and they were inadequate in 1990. So not much has changed on that. But the argument that legal aid was making in Jiggets was that pursuant to the social services law, the agency's OTDA social services had a affirmative duty to provide adequate shelter allowances for families with children. So that's why FHEPS is for specifically families with minor children, because it is for, the case was brought on behalf of the recipients of families in need of aid, right? So that is why that is important. HRA is the Human Resources Administration. So we're about to enter word salad. And just to clear some of the lingo up, right? Because sometimes it seems like we're talking a different language. Everything uses an acronym. So HRA, Human Resources Administration, and HRA is under the New York City Department of Social Services. The New York City Department of Social Services also encompasses the New York City Department of Homeless Services. All three are supervised by OTDA, the the Office of Temporary and Disability Assistance, which is governed by the Department of Social Services in Albany. So this slide is for sources of law. This is really for you to keep for your leisure and to go back to. So these are all of the
different places you could do
get the
research
information.
when you want to go into details about what's a shelter allowance and are there any recent rules about resources or things like that. So that's there for your reference, and we'll go on to the next slide.
Yep. And here is the word salad. This is a very helpful chart. I still use this chart today from when I started in a pinch. It lays out the agencies that we deal with, the acronyms. So again, this is for your reference going forward. I'm gonna skip.
So what benefits does HRA issue? They issue everything on what's called an electronic benefits transfer card, and that's the size of a credit card. And loaded onto that card is a person or a family's cash assistance, which is the cash they receive twice a month. The first part of the month is an A cycle. The second part of the month is a B cycle. And they also loaded onto the card once a month is their SNAP, which used to be called food stamps. Also on the card is an opening of a Medicaid case. So if somebody goes to the doctor or the hospital, they can give their card. And so many of you probably have a card for your health insurance where you're employed. So people who have Medicaid through would have it, it's on a card too. And then so the hospital can, or a doctor can be billed, can bill Medicaid for the visit. Under cash assistance, there's, and we try to call it cash assistance instead of public assistance anymore, because we want to make sure somebody, if they have an open cash assistance case, then they're eligible for FHEPS. If they just had a SNAP case open, they wouldn't be eligible for FHEPS. So we want to focus in on whether or not somebody has a cash assistance case, as opposed to a public assistance, which public assistance encompasses SNAP, it encompasses Medicaid. For the middle class, mortgages are through legislation, and that's a form of a way people can, enhance their wealth over time. So in the cash assistance overview, there are two programs. There is a block grant that, since the Clinton presidency years, are sent to each, money is sent in a block grant to each state based on a history of how much they were getting years ago. And unlike many southern states, New York State has a program for singles and adult couples and adult families that other states don't have, and it's called safety net assistance. And when families normally can get cash assistance for 5 years, and then they get transferred over to a safety net program also, along with the adults, families and adult singles and couples. So the safety net assistance program is funded by state dollars, whereas the family assistance program for most families is funded for 5 years by the federal government. And right now, there are no changes in that program, but we assume DOJ will probably come after those after they go after the big money. So next slide.
Okay, so our focus today is going to be, as Susan mentioned, on the cash assistance portion of the public assistance umbrella, used to be known as welfare. I like the little tip down here that says to ask your clients for specific questions. If they come in and tell you that they're receiving PA or welfare or something like that, you need to sort of zone in with them, ask for maybe a case number, or ask them if the benefits include, you know, a shelter allowance in addition to money on a card, in addition to SNAP, because sometimes they'll just tell you that they have PA, and what they really mean is they're only receiving SNAP, but they're eligible for a lot more. Okay, so what benefits are issued?
We just did that slide.
Oh, okay.
And then we just.
Well, okay.
So,
Go
right. Yeah, so the cash we talked a little bit about family assistance, but it's available for families with dependent children, and that means a child who's under 18 or under 19 and still in in secondary school or a similar program. Or it could be for a person who has immigration status and a verified pregnancy. So how do you verify a pregnancy? They get a letter from a doctor with the person's estimated due date. Somebody has no immigration status. They're not eligible for FHEPS until the child is born, and the child would be a citizen. And we talked about it's primarily funded with federal dollars, mostly for 5 years. But if the head of the house has SSI, or the head of the house has no immigration status, they would stay on until the last child ages out at age 18 or 19. So, so families could get FHEPS for the people who have immigration status in the house. And safety net, there's 2 safety net programs. It's one for singles, and then there's for families who time out of the federal program. Next.
Okay, so why do we care about the category of FA versus SNA, which is the family versus the safety net? Different statutes, regulations, and rules govern it. Non-citizens may be entitled to some state benefits. It helps when you're discussing it with other people, colleagues, people at government agencies, other benefits practitioners. And it might matter for your clients if they want to move out of New York City. It might affect their, you know, ability to continue paying their rent, because some programs might be issued by the city, will not be issued by the state, or vice versa. If somebody's moving into New York City from New York State, they may not be aware of some of the benefits that they might be able to get that New York City specifically provides. So.
Right. We often get questions from clients, well, what if I move to Florida? And, you know, we don't give legal advice about Florida, but many of the southern states only have cash assistance programs for families with minor children for 2 years. And very few states have rent supplements like New York and Massachusetts do. So if people are moving to other states and they don't have income, that could be a big issue. So who can be issued cash assistance? Who must apply for cash assistance? That's what we're going to talk about in the slides that are coming today. So children versus no children, is there a difference? So there is in the amount you receive. In New York City, there are 2 different charts for families who have children under 18 or 19 and families who don't have any minor children in the house. So they pay a little bit more for families with children. That last increase in 2003 because of the Jiggets litigation, and a family of like a pregnant woman would a pregnant person would get $277. A family of two would get 283, and a family of three would get 400. But if there are no minor children in the house, the shelter allowances haven't increased since 1988, which, and so they are lower, and both of them are both shelter allowance schedules for families or families without children, families with children, but the families without children, it's even lower than the families with children, and they're way out of whack with reality. So that's why the FHEPS program and the city FHEPS program help some families or individuals get those programs to supplement the amounts that the state pays, which are wholly inadequate. But it doesn't apply to everybody. Next.
So what is a dependent child? A dependent child is a child that's under 18 years old or under 19 years old and is still in high school or its full-time equivalent. So that could be like a GED program or a vocational program, and they need to have they need to be able to verify their attendance in that program to be considered a dependent child.
And it doesn't apply to college. So it has to be a secondary, high school or secondary school. So if a kid is 18 and in college, and that's the last child in the house, they are not eligible for FHEPS. So we want to just stress that for eligibility rules.
So we're gonna do pop quiz, dependent child pop quiz. Liam is 17 years old and attends CUNY. Would he be a dependent child?
Oh, so we've got some no's and yeses. So the rule is till 18. So he is a dependent child because he's under, somebody wrote in the chat, until he's 18 and age, right? You got that right on. And a bunch of you also said yes. So Liam is, Leo is a minor until he turns 18. So
Sorry, Susan.
Anya is 18 years old and she's getting her GED. Is she a dependent child? So, so the answer for that is yes, because she's under 19 and she's getting her GED. Oops. Okay. And then Raul is 19 and he attends Bronx High School. Is he a dependent child?
It looks like the chat's getting it.
Yep.
Oh.
Yes,
Yep.
right, because he's 19, but he's attending high school.
No. So the answer is no. Once he turns 19, he's not, he ages out, even if he's still in high school. So he's not a dependent child. So Nancy Harb, you got it right.
Is
Debbie,
it because it's under 19, not 19 and under? Is that the distinction then?
Yeah.
right.
So yes.
Okay.
Got me. Marie is 18 years old and attends Columbia University, but she lives at home with her mother.
So she's not in high school and she's 18. So the answer is she's not a minor anymore. So it's a little confusing, and that's why we gave the test. You have to think about it, right? So the rule is you have to be under 18 And if you're between 18 and 19, you have to still be in high school, but at 19, you age out.
Yeah.
Oops.
Oh,
There we go.
so how much cash assistance is my client entitled to receive? So this is going to depend on the earned income in the home at the end of the day, but assuming there's no income in the home, this is the total standard of need. Oops. The bottom row where it says monthly. So for a household of one, they would receive $183.10 in food and other, which is their cash, $277 in shelter, and their total monthly grant would be $460.10. And that's for a family with children, right? And we could see that the shelter amounts for a household of two is 283, for a household of three is 400, and that they are substantially different than the shelter amounts for households without children. So that is important to note, just going forward.
So if you're wondering how a household of one might have minor children, we're gonna get to that.
Yes. And who's included in a household? So there are rules to who has to be a part of a cash assistance case when somebody is applying, right? So it's going to be, if it's a household without children, the applicant, and if they are living with their legally, and they're legally married, that spouse has to be a part of the case. If they are not legally married, that partner does not have to be a part of the application and the case. Households with children, right? The applicant and their biological child and any siblings under the age of 18 need to be a part of the case. Yeah, and any stepchildren or adoptive children need to be a part of the case at the time of applying. So with that, 18, if you're 18 to 20 years old, you can have a separate cash portion of the case, and that grant will go directly to the 18 to 20-year-old at their pro rata rate share, but not the SNAP or the shelter allowance. So what that means is you have a client, they have two children, one is under the age of 18, let's say one is 19 years old. They can have their own cash line and receive a pro rata share of the cash grant. I think I'm explaining that correctly,
Yeah.
but they won't get an individual shelter allowance. That shelter would still be a part of the parent's case.
And we don't normally recommend that, right? Because mom is running the household. She needs every dollar. And a family of three is only getting $389 a month. So if a third of that went to the 19-year-old, they would get $129 a month, and they're likely to spend it on clothes and things, or music, but not helping to pay the electric bill, or paying the all the other bills that are happen. But if there is a savvy 18, a kid in the house who's over 18, they could have part of the cash go to them. Most moms don't tell that to their children, and we normally represent the mother, so we're not usually advising the young adult that they can have a share of the money.
So Lada talked about this. When can a family be a household of one? It's not the heartbeats in the home, right? So a household of one for families with children exists where there's a verified pregnancy and the parent is eligible for cash assistance due to their immigration status, right? So we talked about that. And or when a household member has SSI. and there are minor children in the home. The SSI is invisible and it's not counted towards the budget, but they're also not part of the count for the cash assistance household. So,
Sorry.
oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, it can get really confusing about the, if who has, the SSI is gonna be invisible whether, no matter whose it is, if there's a child in the household, but whether or not you're gonna be eligible for FHEPS is gonna depend on whose SSI it is. And so that might just get a little confusing. I just want you to be aware of that. Because if the child is getting SSI, they're not really gonna be like visible to the cash assistance case. The FHEPS is gonna be, you're not gonna be able to get them FHEPS in that situation. So it would, if the mom is getting the SSI and the child is not in the cash assistance case, they're visible, then you're gonna be able to get the FHEPS.
No, and that's a great point, Vlada, because that's something that can come up a lot and sneak up on you.
I've run into it a couple times now, so I wanted to flag that.
And it's always the worst feeling when you initially look at a case and you think that someone could be FHEPS eligible, and then when you really get into it and you see something like that, the pang in the heart. And citizen children of nice parents. So legal aid, we use the term nice for not eligible due to immigration status.
And we came up with that term with the state. So when we were submitting JIGIS applications to the state, we didn't have to divulge to the state anybody's immigration status. Because you could be here in the country legally, right, with a visa, a 90-day visitor's visa, or some other reason, or with work authorization, but not be eligible for cash assistance because of your immigration status. So we never want to say somebody is undocumented or that they're an alien. So we try not to use those words.
Okay, so a verified pregnancy, exception to the child in the home rule. So when you have a verified pregnancy, that means that was going to meet the dependent child requirements for FHEPS. And if as long as the parent has an immigration status that is eligible. The household size for budgeting purposes is not going to increase until the child is actually born, though. And you're going to need a medical letter with an estimated due date in order to verify the pregnancy with HRA. The pregnancy allowance is going to be $50. It's going to be eligible for 4 months if verified, and it's not retroactive. So you want to start receiving it in the from month 4 to month. Excuse me. You want to apply at the beginning of your 3rd month of your pregnancy in order to start receiving it by the 4th month in order to be able to get it.
So now we're going to move into a hypothetical. This is our client, Maria, and her family. Maria is a citizen. She's 39 years old, and she works on the books. She earns $100 per week, and that's her gross income. She also receives $30 a month in Social Security survivor benefits on her deceased husband's account as a surviving parent of a child under 16. And she has $500 in the bank. Her partner, they are not legally married. He does not have status. He's also 39 and he does not have income. Maria's mother, Clara, lives in the home. She's 61 years old and is a lawful permanent resident. She does not have income and has $3,000 in the bank. Tina is 16 years old. She's Maria's daughter, but Jose is not her father. She's 12 and receives $60 a month in Social Security survivor benefits. And Anthony is the son of Maria and Jose and is 6 years old and receives supplemental security income and the state supplement of $23 for a total of $990. They were receiving cash assistance up until 3 months ago when Maria's income increased. So they were no longer eligible for cash assistance and her case closed. Maria then lost that job and she now has another job with lower pay. In the meantime, her mom moved in with them, and Maria now wants to know if they are eligible for cash assistance and they are owing rent. So what do we think we should ask Maria about her family? Okay, we want to know, well, we want to know who lives with her, right? So who, we enter documents, right? We want to know their age, the ages of the household members. And we want to know their relationships, right? Sometimes that could be an uncomfortable conversation. Someone can say, clients can say all the time, my husband or my wife or my partner. And they're using terms that we may think of as legal terms of art, like husband, wife, right? That's illegal. You would think legally married, but they lived together for 25 years. They think of themselves as married, but they're not married, right? That's something that would be relevant. So you want to know their relation to each other. You want to know each individual person's connection, right? If they're unrelated, let's see, who's just looking at the chat to see if we have any questions. We want to know the income of everyone in the home. We want to know the frequency of pay. We want to ask the frequency of pay. Are you paid weekly, bi-weekly, semi-monthly, monthly? You want to make sure that you are able to see pay stubs if possible, right? So you can calculate the monthly income. And if somebody says to you, let's say Maria said, my son receives Social Security, and she didn't say SSI, right? Social Security can be a lot of things. It could be retirement, it could be disability insurance, it could be supplemental security income, and all of those things have different implications. So you want to clarify as to what someone is actually receiving, right? And you would want to ask to see their award letter. And you want to know about resources, bank accounts, tangible assets, property. Sometimes it may seem like those questions would not need to be asked, but and sometimes they do, and you would be surprised. So, right, just some intake questions we would ask Maria and her family, right, to get more information and to determine her eligibility status. And I just want to flag for everyone just an important fact that I just want people to think about is that they received cash assistance up until 3 months ago. Just want to flag that. So, common terms of art, right? What is income to cash assistance eligibility and income to everyday people can be two different things. Unfortunately, and I wish the world was different, cash assistance, for the purposes of cash assistance, income casts a wide net, right? It would be any money that's coming into the house, right? Whether it's earned or unearned, dollars coming in, right? And you need to know the source of those dollars, right? So that can include tips, right? If someone works as a waitress or a waiter in the service industry and they're receiving tips, right? That's something that would count as income. Social Security, like I said, the Social Security Administration issues many benefits, and you need to know if it is supplemental security income, disability insurance, retirement, survivor's benefits, and the like. So that's very important.
And it's important to make the distinction between the SSI and the other ones, because if they're getting SSI, they're gonna get that, and they have a minor in the household, they're gonna be blind to that. But if it's not SSI, if it's SSD or anything else, that's, retirement benefits, that's not something that's gonna be covered under that. So you want to make sure.
Right. And going off of that, because SSI is going to be blind to the budget and not counted, disability insurance, retirement, Social Security retirement, survivor benefits, with no SSI in the home, that's budgeted dollar for dollar. So that means every dollar in is a dollar off the cash grant. We'll cover this a little later, but when budgeting, right, the equations work out to first take from everything but shelter. Shelter is less to be deducted from if the rules haven't changed. So someone's cash can decrease the cash they receive on the EBT with the income in the home. And resources like we talked about, assets, money in the bank, money under the pillow, your cars, if it's over 12,000, and property that you do not live in.
Okay, so back to our hypothetical family. Okay. Does everybody remember this? Because then we could probably move on to the next slide.
Yeah. Next one.
Okay, so who in our hypothetical family has to be included in the cash assistance household? That means whose resources and income is going to count and who is legally responsible for whom. So we have Maria, Jose, Clara, Tina, and Anthony. So do we remember who's who? I'm just gonna do a quick reminder again. So we've got Maria. She's a citizen of the United States. She's 39. She does have a job on the books. She does also receive Social Security survivors benefits for her deceased husband. And she has $500 in the bank. Then there is Jose. He's Maria's partner. They are not married, and he's also NEIS. He's the same age as her, and he has no income. We have Maria's mom, who recently moved in with them. She's 61 years old. She is an LPR, a lawful permanent resident, also no income, but she does have $3,000 in the bank. We have Tina, Maria's daughter, not Jose's daughter. She is her daughter with the deceased husband, and Tina receives $60 a month in Social Security survivors benefits for her deceased father. And finally, we have Anthony. He's Maria and Jose's 6-year-old son, and he does receive SSI and SSP. The SSI is 967 and the SSP is 23. That equals 990. So that's our family.
And SSP is a state supplemental payment. So for everybody on SSI in New York State, they get a tiny, if they live with another person, they get $23 if they extra from the state. And if they live alone, they get $87 from the state. Most states don't give any extra.
Okay. So back to who must be included, right? So to answer this question, we have to go back to the mandatory filing unit, right? So who has to be included? So Maria is coming to us. She's our client. For the purposes of this hypothetical, she's going to be the applicant, right? So who also has to be on that case with Maria? Right? So Tina would have to be on the case with.
You want to move forward a slide? I think that it's going to be.
Yes.
Yeah, there we go.
So this is the mandatory filing unit, right? So if adult applies for cash assistance, their married spouse and natural adoptive minor with whom they live must also apply. A minor must be included in the application for the cash assistance and of their adoptive or natural parents, and their siblings and half siblings who live with them must also apply. The exceptions to this rule is anyone who is nice, not eligible due to the immigration status, any SSI recipient, if the family has a minor child, or foster care or adopted minor with foster care or an adoption subsidy. Okay. So.
Here's a little flow chart to help you kind of visualize it.
So we're going to start with the green star. So the natural adoptive parent of the minor children.
And
right?
that's going to be Maria in our case. So you could just kind of visualize Maria's name in that bubble.
So then who flows from Maria?
She's got how many natural children from what we know? her 2 children.
So Daniela, you write Tina. Destiny is at 2, so, right, we would be then evaluating for Tina and Jose. So, no, Tina and Anthony.
Yeah.
Now we get to Anthony. Does Jose, what happens with Jose on the case? Because he's Anthony's father, but he's not married to Maria.
And he's also NEIS.
Yes. Yep, not included. So then we have, gonna go back, Clara, who's Maria's mother, and she's a lawful permanent resident. Does she have to be included? Yep. She does not have to be included. Okay. So before we get to the next slide, a lot of useful information can be found in the OTRA Temporary Assistance Source Book. It goes through everything, the nuts and the bolts. It has examples. It points you to the statutes and the regulations. You can find it on OTRA's website or at the Western New York Law Center. And it's just something that everyone should just bookmark if we're working with cash benefits and HRA, because sometimes it is very helpful to point to a specific regulation or a specific rule that OTRA or HRA itself has promulgated in advocating for your client. So it's always good to know where to find information, especially about the mandatory filing unit, because there can be mistakes with that could impact your client's initial eligibility for cash. So the first exception to the mandatory filing rule is that if somebody is not eligible due to their immigration status, they do not have to be included in the budget calculation if they do not have income, or if they have income, but their income is less than their pro rata share of the cash assistance monthly allotment for a household of this size, including that parent. So that would mean a household of 3. The cash is the total of the food and other. That's $389. So you'd be looking at the pro rata share of $389. So Susan, that's $129, you said?
Yep.
Your head.
And the pro rata share of the shelter allowance too.
Oh, of the shelter too. So I'm gonna do $789 divided by 3.
Right.
Hold on, just filling up the calculator. I don't like math. 263. So, and for the purposes of our hypothetical, if Jose had income that was less than $263, he would not need to be included on the application, and he would not be a part of the mandatory filing unit. But if he did have income that was in excess of $263, he would have to be a part of the application. And he wouldn't be, when you would get a printout, it wouldn't say that he is active, but his income would be included in the budget.
Yes.
Right.
So
The budget would go up to 4 instead of 3.
Okay. Right. So NICE is only people that do not have status, but it doesn't include lawful permanent residents, people who have green cards or crew call status, and many non-citizens qualified for cash assistance. I think in the materials we're providing, we provide a helpful chart. So here is a slide with additional information as to where you can find resources about immigration status and eligibility. So these are also good links to bookmark. I'll just hang out here for a second if anyone wants to screenshot it or something. Okay.
Right. Exception number 2 to the mandatory filing unit rule is families with a minor child for and SSI. So in a cash assistance household with minor children, if it is an adult-only household, then then the SSI is not invisible, and you're not gonna be eligible for the cash assistance, most likely, depending on how much you're getting. And then HRA considers it invisible. The income and the resources of the SSI recipient are not counted towards the budget. So that's if there is a child in the household. The income and resources of anyone in the cash assistance household who receives SSI as any part of their income. So if they receive a combination of SSI and SSD, it's all going to be invisible. Even if they're receiving as little as $1 in SSI, the entire SSD will also then be scooped in and become invisible.
Yep, also with survivor benefits, so just going back to our hypo, if Tina was receiving SSI and the survivor benefits would not be budgeted against the case. Okay, refresher.
Okay, so back to our hypothetical family. Tina
That stayed the same. So we're gonna go on. So who was in our filing unit? Maria. And whose mandatory filing unit and whose resources and income count, right? That's also important. So Maria, she's a part of the application, and her $100 per week gross income is going to count, and the $500 she has in the bank is going to count. And as well as Tina and her $60 a month in survivor's benefits. Anthony is going to be invisible to the budget. And like we have a note here, Clara, Maria's mom, could apply for her own cash assistance case. And I saw someone said that in the chat earlier on, that the mom could apply.
So the basic lesson of all this is it's complicated. So you need to know the rules.
How much cash assistance can a 2-person household receive monthly if they are otherwise eligible? So if you're gonna look at the chart that is on the screen, you will see, you see the household sizes on the top column. So you would find your 2-person household, and then you will find what's underneath, the amounts that are listed underneath that. You have your usual standard of need for households with minor children, which is $574.50, and then your usual standard of need for adult-only households of 2 is going to be a little lower at $541.50.
Right. And this is kind of like a side note, because what I'm about to say is for one-shots, but it's just very important to be mindful of the amounts and for what a household with family with children receives and what a household without minor children receives, right? For the purposes of one-shots, right? The standard of need is how we determine future ability. Somebody has to have more than the standard of need in order to be eligible for a one-shot after paying the rent for that month, right? So you just want to make sure that you are aware of the rules of the eligibility for how SSI impacts that, how disability impacts that, how someone's immigration status impacts that, because it's all comes back around. Okay. So how much cash? So food and other, that is the cash, that's the amount that goes onto the EBT. And the shelter allowance is paid directly to the landlord.
Most of the time.
Yes. Sometimes it could be sent to the client, and then the client is to provide that to the landlord.
Sometimes
nobody
it's
tells
budgeted properly and they're not sending any cash assistance at all because they say they haven't gotten the lease or proof of an obligation.
Verification.
So you want to make sure, you want to ask your client when you're meeting with them, is your shelter on the budget? They might look a little confused. You're going to ask, are they sending the, mandatory amount to your landlord? Is your landlord getting rent on your behalf? They might be evasive. Ask if they're getting it by any chance. Sometimes things are not great in those conversations.
Yep.
You can't ask for that money in a one-shot deal if it's been paid. So you certainly want to find out. Just God forbid your client's been cashing those checks and keeping it. That's going to be grant money that you're going to be seeking. So a lot of stuff can be found out when you just dig a little bit deeper.
Cool. No.
So food and other allowance is your basic grant, aka the pre-add. It's gonna have your home energy allowance and your supplemental home energy allowance, the HEA and the SHEA. What?
Go ahead, Laura. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. What is the standard of need, also known as the SON? A typical standard of need is going to have your food and other, the F&O grant, plus the shelter allowance. That's the ideal version, and the most typical version. Less common SON is going to be a less ideal version where they're not sending the shelter allowance for some reason to the landlord. You're going to want to be finding out why. And the least common and probably the gold standard would be FNO plus shelter plus some additional allowance, maybe a pregnancy allowance or a restaurant allowance that's helping our clients just a little bit more. What comprises the FNO? So the full FNO grant's going to be $389, and that's going to be comprised of your basic grant, your pre-add, which is your shelter allowance, plus the basic allowance that goes on the card, and I think yes, there's one other, and then you're also going to have the home energy allowance and the supplemental, the HEA and the SHEA. Maybe the whole. And what comprises the full standard of need? That's going to be your FNO and your shelter allowance together, giving you your full grant, the full cash grant, full standard of need. And this is for a family of 3. I think Michelle was pointing that out before and highlighting it, that these amounts are specifically for a family of 3. So going to be lower if you're talking 1 or 2 people in the household, and going to be different if you're talking with children and without, again.
Beautiful, right here. So here's the chart of what Vlada was just saying, and just circle back to a point I was making before. So when budgeting income and doing those calculations, the basic grant, the HEA and the SHEA, aka the total food and other, that's what is going to be deducted from first, right? HRA is not going to try to eat into the shelter allowance first, right? And any shelter that can go out is helpful to our clients.
And this is just the same well, not the same. This is for a family with minors. The other one was for adult families.
Right, and this one just shows up to a house of 9. And you see, once you get above 7, right? The shelter amount stays at $746, I believe. It doesn't increase. But the total cash amount, I think, increases about $48 when you get above 7, Susan.
It's $78
Oh, no, 78
per family, which is just the food and other being increased.
Yeah, and shelter stays the same.
Right. It's an old-fashioned rule that, that conservatives thought people were having more children just to get that extra $78. So they limited increasing the shelter allowance. There are not, most families who receive cash assistance are between a family of 3 and 4.
So like I said, at the top of the training, the schedule for adults hasn't changed since 1988. And like Susan was saying, the schedule amounts for families with children went up slightly in 2003 following the Jiggets lawsuit. But since then, they have not increased, despite everything else getting extremely expensive and unaffordable for our clients.
And one of the problems with cash assistance and shelter allowances, they're not indexed like other government benefits. Like SSI goes up every year in January generally. Social food stamps go up every year in October. Generally, Section 8 goes up every year in January, but cash assistance stays the same from year to year unless the state legislature increases it. And they generally, they generally don't increase it from year to year, which is a huge problem for the households that we serve.
So the resources rule. So resources are available cash, property, and assets. So cash that you have technically anywhere. So cash that you have in the coffee can in your cabinet, cash in the bank, cash in a CD, cash in your pension, cash in your retirement account, depending on the client, right? Properties that you're not living in, and cars over $12,000, right? So the resource limits for cash assistance applicants, for a household without a disabled person, someone who is disabled or 60 years or older, is $2,500. If there is someone who is 60 years or older or somebody with a disability in the home, the resource limit is $3,750. So that's important to note. What's also important to note is that if somebody's receiving supplemental security income, the resource limit for that person is $2,000. $2,001 can trigger a recoupment on behalf of SSI. So even though the cash assistance resource limit is $2,500 for a household without someone over the age of 60 or with a disability, if somebody in that household receives SSI, it is important to keep an eye on that, because you don't want them to go over the $2,000 limit. And if you're in receipt of cash assistance, you're currently receiving it, you can have up to $10,000 in resources.
And that's a new rule that just came into effect in December of 2023. And it's a good rule because if somebody, played bingo and won money, or they had a small lawsuit, or they got a buyout in a housing court case, they could take $10,000 and put it in the bank. Of course, it's not good to get a buyout these days because where are you going to go? But you're allowed to have up to $10,000 in the bank, not a penny more. And it's, if people are saving, they get a job and they're saving and they're trying to get out of poverty, it's good to save a little bit so you have a cushion.
Right, and there were some additional changes too with like the income disregard and the 6-month income disregard rule that promotes recipients of cash assistance being able to work and to continue receiving benefits.
That's new, right? That's a once in a lifetime income disregard came in
6-month one, right?
yeah, it was like in December 2023 or something.
Yeah.
So resource limits, 2,500 is the most that an applicant household can have in liquid and non-liquid assets, and still qualify for cash assistance when all members of the cash assistance household are under the age of 60 and not disabled. An applicant household can have liquid and non-liquid assets totaling $3,750 in resource and still qualify for cash assistance when any member of the cash assistance household is ages 60 years and older or disabled. Thank you, Michelle, for highlighting the and the or. So if you guys just make sure that you're paying attention to that, because for the first one, 2,500, you can be both. But for the 3,750, you have to be one or the other. And again, just to highlight, once you are a recipient of cash assistance, you can have up to $10,000 in resources. But while you're applying for cash assistance in the application status, you want to make sure that you're paying attention to the limits of 2,500 or 3,750, depending on which one will apply to you.
So before the changes to the
Oh.
regulations, so before October 1st, 2020, these amounts are $2,000 for households without where there was not a disabled person or someone over the age of 60. And if somebody was disabled or there was someone over the age of 60, the resource limit was $3,000. Applicants and recipients must use their savings for emergencies such as rent and utilities, right? And that's not an unfamiliar premise or requirement of HRA, right? I think one of the worst times is tax season because clients get their tax returns and I have to tell them that they have to pay it towards their rent before we could apply for a one-shot. And more often than not, they have other plans for that money, like many people do and should, but HRA requires that any savings be used for the emergencies and their utilities.
And they will ask you about what has your client done their income taxes? If not, why not? When are they doing them? Do you know how much they're gonna get? How much are they gonna be able to put of that towards the rent arrears? They're gonna ask all the questions. I want to see all the proof.
And they, they don't, if there's 10,000 in the bank, they will probably let them keep 1,000 or so. In the old days, if there was the lower amount, they wanted them to spend every penny of it, but they will let them sometimes keep 1,000 or so.
Countable resources, the item must be available in order to count it. So a trust fund for a minor is usually exempt from a countable resource, right? And that kind of makes sense because it's not available to the minor if something is in a trust. There's a trustee and there are a bunch of rules surrounding that and bank accounts set up by grandma who hasn't given access, right? If you don't have access to it, you can't get to it. It's not available to you. And like I said before, SSI only permits $2,000 per a month in resources, and a penny over can cause a recoupment for the entire monthly amount, right? And that could really hurt our clients, right? If they're receiving the full SSI amount, 1 month they have 2,001 cents, they'll be recouped for that month.
Resources that are excluded. Resource exclusions include a primary home, lien requirements stopped in 2022, a lump sum from earned income tax credit, except for emergencies, and one car, depending on the value of the car. This
Again, source book,
place for resources.
wonderful resource. So, is Maria's cash assistance household below the resource limit? So, we've talked about whose resources count in our hypothetical family. So, the mandatory filing unit includes Maria and Tina. And the total countable resources is going to be Maria's $500. Yes. So you add up the countable resources of those in the mandatory filing unit. The resource limit for the household is $2,500 because Maria is 39 and Tina is 16. So Maria's household would be below the resource limit. And just to note, that is different from getting to the income calculation, right? We were only talking about the resources. That's what's in the bank, what's in the savings, the car.
What's immediately available, essentially.
Income rule. In order to qualify for ongoing cash assistance, a cash assistance total countable income cannot be more than the standard of need for their family size. So the standard of need for Maria and Tina is $574.50. So in order to be eligible for ongoing cash assistance, Maria and Tina's monthly income cannot exceed $574.50. They would be eligible if it's $573.
Not eligible if it's 575.
Yep.
So what is income? Income is money that is received in any given month. So that can be earned income and that can be unearned income. Earned income is specifically income that you earn on or off the books. It's from a job. Unearned income is anything coming into the household that is not from a job. So that'll be your unemployment insurance benefits, your Social Security Administration, anything under that umbrella would be unearned income. Somebody is helping you out by giving you $300 a month to survive, that might count towards your unearned income. They're going to want to know every penny that you're getting.
Right, and your employment income, well, your earned income is going to look like your employment income. Susan, just for clarification, retirement income from Social Security based on work history.
That's unearned income.
Okay.
Even though you earned it at the time, you're not earning it today.
Earned income is if you're working for it and they're paying and someone's paying you, that's the only time it's earned income. Anything else, the phrasing is a little silly.
Yeah.
So we're back to
Confusing.
the source book.
This book.
Again, great resource. We're putting it here many times to highlight that it is very, very helpful. So how much of the cash assistance applicant's family income is countable?
So we have our, oh, go ahead.
Oh, so determine someone's gross income, right? It's going to depend on how they provide that information to you. So if it's Maria and she gets $100 a week, you do $100 times 4.33 weeks, right? And that'll get you the monthly income. So you're going to also want to go back and see in your client's history of whether or not they've had cash assistance in the past, it fell off, whatever might have happened, to determine if the family received cash assistance at some point in time within the past 4 months. If they have not received cash assistance within the past 4 months, then all of their gross income is countable. That means the entire amount, no deductions, goes through budgeted dollar for dollar. If they have received cash assistance within the past 4 months, they will get the benefit of the 63% income disregard. So to do that, you get the 63% income disregard and then the $150 work disregard. And that is deducted from the earned income. So for the purposes of Maria, right, as an example, she got $100 a week times 4.33, $433 a month. Maria received cash assistance within the last 3 months, right? So she falls under the 4-month rule. So we would multiply her income by 63%
And then we subtract that from
from the
what
total.
you just got.
433 minus 279. 29. Might be off by cents. The total is
It's in
100,
the slides, I think.
huh? It's in the
It's in
slide.
the slides.
No more. Yeah, I didn't understand that number. The next. It was $37 and minus one.
Is it in the next slide?
So, yeah,
No, no.
right here. So $433 income times the six,
Earned income disregard, is that what EID? Sorry.
yeah,
Right, so the 37%, right? So it's, you can times it by 37%, or you can times it by 63%, and then you have to subtract it. So there's two different ways to do the math.
okay. So after the calculations, I find it easier just to do the 63%.
Me too, that's the way I do it, the old fashioned way. It's
So,
two-step process.
then the gross monthly income is $160.21. Once you times the income disregard, the earned income disregard, you deduct the $150. What will be counted towards the cash assistance case is then $10.21. Here's the $90. Plus the $90 in survivor benefits because that's unearned income. So you have Maria's $30 plus Tina's $60 in survivor benefits. So the total countable income in the home ends up being $121. I apologize if that was disjointed.
But you have the slide to go over it if
Yes.
you ever need to do the
And
math.
such is cash assistance budgeting.
Confusing.
Jointed. But the most important thing, right, is that you are first applying the earned income disregard. You do not do the work disregard, the $150 first, right? Throw it all the way back to PEMDAS. You could put the monthly income times 63% minus, well, then in parentheses, minus 150. You have to multiply the percentage first and then do the subtraction of the work disregard for the earned income. And then don't forget about the unearned income that has to be added at the end.
Or subtracted.
Yes. Math. Okay. So how much can Maria's household receive in cash assistance per month? You subtract the total countable income from the standard of need for the household. So Maria's standard of need is $574.50 a month. The countable income that will be budgeted against her case is $100.20. So her total cash assistance grant is going to be $474.29. And with that, right, with the household of two, she will get the full shelter amount, $283, right? And if there are any deductions from the, it'll come from the cash, the basic cash grant, the total food and other.
So earned income eligibility for cash assistance for applicants not in receipt during the last 4 months. So if you were not receiving it for the last 4 months, is what they're saying. But you had been receiving it previous to that, essentially. So she's eligible for cash assistance if her earned income is is Maria eligible for cash assistance if her earned income is 1,500 for 3? Effective October 1st, 2022, both singles and families are eligible for the $150, this is everything we've been talking about, for the $150 work disregard when applying for cash assistance, assuming they were not in receipt during the last 4 months. So then you're gonna do the 1,500 minus 150, which is gonna give you 1,350. And that's gonna bring us to Maria's disregarded income is a lot higher than the standard of need for 3 or the 789, and thus she is not eligible for cash assistance.
So many people who are working are not going to be eligible for cash assistance because the standard of need, 789 for 3, is so low. And the only thing they disregard is the 150. Unless they were on welfare and cash assistance in the last 4 months.
So Susan, I have a question to
Sure.
that. Let's go with Maria and Tina. They're eligible for cash assistance. If Maria's wages increase, does she still receive the benefit of the 63% disregard?
Yes.
And would that change, or would there be any penalties to her if she does not report her income within, I think it's a 10-day period?
Right. So most people are supposed to report, everybody is supposed to report within 10 days of receipt of their first paycheck that they're getting money, or if they get an increase in their pay. Now, not everybody reports timely, but it is important to report, because if HRA does a computer match while Maria is sleeping and finds out she's making money, she hasn't reported it, she's going to get a notice in the mail, Maria, you are no longer eligible for cash assistance, because you don't get the work disregards unless you report them. So it's really important for everybody to report the income in a timely manner, and so that they don't get dinged by not reporting income and then HRA wants to close their case, especially if people are getting FHEPS or city FHEPS, because those rent supplements now are huge.
So let's assume Maria's earned income was $149 higher than the standard of need. Then my Zoom is in the way. Automatically eligible. If Maria was not in receipt of cash assistance within the last 4 months, but her gross monthly earned income is only $150 more than the standard of need of 789, is she eligible for ongoing cash assistance? 789 plus 149 is $938, and she would be eligible. Susan, I'm gonna tap you in.
Yeah, I'm here. So that just remember, if somebody hasn't been on cash assistance in the last 4 months,
Not in receipt.
they don't get the $63 work disregard. They only get the $150 working disregard. And so 789 plus 149 is so little, 938. That means she's making less than 200, less than 250 a week. And if she's only making 938, she can get cash assistance. And then once they open her case, they'll apply the 63% and she'll get, a lot more money. If somebody's making $2,000 a month and they walk into your office and they say, I can't afford the rent's $3,000 a month and I'm only making $2,000 a month, they're unfortunately, if it's a family of three, they're not going to be eligible for the FHEPS program because they can't get cash assistance. So you're going to have to think about a one-shot deal or ask if they have shelter history or one of the other qualifying reasons for getting city FHEPS. So it's tough. It's because cash assistance levels are so low and they make these rules to get on cash assistance so hard, very few people will be eligible for cash assistance and therefore FHEPS. So it's a way they keep people from getting the program.
And I think it's just important to note, and I think this is what was tripping me up, that if her income was unearned, so if it was Social Security, right, the disregards wouldn't apply and she would not be eligible.
Yeah, that's another really harsh rule.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people are going to come, well, I can get Social Security and cash assistance. And generally the rule is no.
And those situations are they're confuncles because you're in a situation where your client is not eligible for cash, right? They may be receiving SSI. The rent is unaffordable. They're in a non-pay and there may not be a way to preserve the apartment. Right? Because a single adult who receives SSI is not going to be able to receive cash. So
Might need to look into other ways of getting them benefits.
And we'll talk about that, about rent arrears next week.
That's coming up. Okay, so whose income counts? The income of those in the mandatory filing unit is used to calculate the cash assistance budget. And we were just discussing the mandatory filing unit this entire training, so I hope you guys know what that is by now.
just think of immediate families, lines of responsibilities. Is it
The people, yeah, so the applicant plus anybody that is immediately related to them, and if it's minors, their siblings, everyone is gonna get sort of grouped in. If you're married, it's gonna be your spouse.
So it's important to always remember the SSI exception. So families with a minor child, if the parent or the minor has SSI, the budget is aligned to the SSI income, right? So $1 of SSI makes all of a person's SSD be treated as SSI. So you could have a situation where somebody's receiving supplemental security income and survivor's benefits. The survivor's benefits become invisible because there's SSI. A family without a minor child doesn't receive the same benefit. If a spouse has an SSI, the other spouse gets half of a PA budget for two. So their grant is deducted. If an adult married couple each gets SSI and they have a 19-year-old child, that 19-year-old would get 1/3 of the public assistance budget for three, right? So it's prorated, right?
The
So-
parents aren't getting anything, the child's getting 1/3.
So and in this one spouse isn't getting anything, the other spouse is getting half the grant.
SSI is not SSD. So Social Security income is not the same as Social Security disability, not Social Security retirement. None of those are going to be the same as SSI. SSI is its own thing. And you want to, as we've been saying this whole training, you want to keep that in mind because if there is a family with a minor in the household, then the SSI is going to be, the person receiving SSI is going to be blind to the budget. So you want to be looking out for that specific distinction always. So if Sarah receives 990 in SSI and her 13-year-old child has no income, how many people can be in the cash assistance household? So that i.e. is who's getting does the SSI get budgeted in short? And the SSI is not going to be budgeted because we have a child in the household. So what if Sarah receives $990 in Social Security income and Social Security disability combined, and she still has her 13-year-old child with no income in the household? What's going to happen then? Well, we just said they're going to get combined, not going to get budgeted. What if Sarah receives SSD only though? No SSI. That's going to be budgeted dollar for dollar.
And I just want to reiterate this point. It's very important to request from your client any and all award letters, because it could be a mixed bag. A household can receive multiple forms of Social Security. One person can receive SSI, like in the case of Sarah. Someone receives SSI, someone receives SSD, someone can receive survivor's benefits. And when you're speaking to your client, they could just say, we receive Social Security, or they receive Social Security, right? So you want to be able to get those award letters and see what it is actually being categorized as. And we are done with our slides.
So do people have questions? We're happy to answer questions today, as we went through the slides so quick. Everybody's so smart.
Feel free to put your questions in the chat, but also you can, should I allow people to raise their hands if they want to say the question out loud? Somebody, Lennon Martinez says, if a parent has an active cash assistance, but the child doesn't because the child has SSI, can the parent still get a FHEPS voucher?
Yes. So as long as the child could be on SSI or the mom could be on SSI and the kid on cash assistance, we need one person on cash assistance, and we need and then that person on cash assistance would get the FHEPS. So if the kid's on SSI, the kid will not get FHEPS and has to contribute 30%. So they would get FHEPS for one, and the kid would get have to contribute 30% of their SSI towards the house. With city FHEPS, it's different. The kid on SSI their rent would be subsidized, but they also have to pay 30%. But city FHEPS could kick in a little bit more money for the kid on SSI. So they're just different rules for this two programs.
So there's a question, could I submit a FHEPS to stay application for a family, though the parent is having trouble adding the minor to her case? How can I assist in this matter? So before submitting the FHEPS application, I would assist the client with contacting the Benefit Access Center and getting the child added to the case, right? You might need to provide documentation that the child's living in the home, birth certificates, social security cards, things like that to get the child.
School letters.
A school letter and records to get the child added. But all issues with the cash assistance case should be corrected and addressed before submitting the FHEPS application.
And the only time we say you should send in a FHEPS application that's not perfect is when you're hitting the $20,000 rule. So with FHEPS, they will pay $20,000 without asking questions about the amount, but and if you haven't finished litigating the case or getting the budget fixed, you put in the application to stop what's called tolling the arrears, and you have 6 months to fix it and resubmit. But all the rest of the time, don't waste the FHEPS unit's time. Get the case fixed and then submit it. But so at intake, it's really important to be thinking about getting what's called a housing court report, used to be called a printout, to figure out Maria's told me these people are in the house. Are they on her budget? If they need to be on the budget, who else is in the house? Do I have all their documents? So you want to try to get as much information at your first intake day and then follow up with a client. So then if you're a housing court lawyer, you can settle the case more easily. And if you're assisting the person, because FHEPS applications to stay are now are supposed to be done at the welfare centers, or what are now called the benefits access centers. So they are supposed to do FHEPS applications. They don't always do them, but they should be. And we have a lawsuit about that, and we'll talk about that more on the 19th. Oh, there's a new message. Did we get that question? I'm a little frozen.
It just said thank you.
Ah,
I think it was the new message. Any other questions? Okay. Well, if not, then thank you so much to the Legal Aid Society for this presentation. Just to let everybody know, again, we will be posting it on our website, the live stream and also the links, the slides and things like that on our website. And then we do have a series of trainings that the Legal Aid Society will be continuing to do for us. If you guys wanted to just let them know about our next training that you guys are doing.
so the next one is on rent arrears. So we're going to talk about when somebody has an open cash assistance case and they need extra rent money to pay the rent. We're also going to talk about one-shot deals for people who have other income and are seeking back money to pay the arrears for a one-time grant. So we'll be talking about that on March 12th. And that training is from 2 to 4. Then on March 19th, we're talking about FHEPS to stay in the community. So now that you all have some good knowledge about cash assistance, we'll talk more about FHEPS. And on the 19th, FHEPS to stay. And then on the 26th of March, we'll be talking about city FHEPS to stay in the community. We won't be talking about city FHEPS to leave shelter.
Yeah, lots of exciting new trainings and information that will be relevant to everyone. Just to let everybody know, if you have clients, we also have a weekly training that Housing Court Answers that does. It's for tenants particularly, in addition to the ones we host for advocates. I don't see any other questions. So if we don't have any other questions, thank you so much, Susan, Michelle, and Vlada. We really appreciate you doing this for us, and I'm pretty sure everyone learned something new today, or at least got clarity on some questions. Yeah, and I will post our website again to everyone, but somebody asked for it. Anything else if you guys wanted to say?
No, we'll see you next week.
Right, definitely. All right.
Thanks, everyone.